it's impossible to develop technologies that are as utopian as their promoters promise, because they're always embedded in political, economic, financial systems, and they reflect racial, sexual, gender, and other biases. And I'm going to take us relatively quickly through a whole series of slides. I have 60, so this will give me sort of 20 seconds per slide. First of all, I wanted to say that throughout history, you do have dystopian literature, but the futurologists and promoters of technology often praise it as a solution to existing problems. They tout these wonderful things to satisfy a variety of human needs, improving communications, cheap and inexpensive and environmentally sound energy, and so on. But the utopian virtues of the internet age, instantaneous access to information, for example, and cheaper goods, often averts our attention from the problems that accompany modern technology, not the least of which are racial and gender prejudices, but also loss of privacy and hacking, inequity and waste. There are certain virtues with modern technologies, and I want to take you through 3 of them that I've been studying to point out the dangers of embracing unquestioningly modern technology as a solution to the problems we have. I want to look at autonomous vehicles, automobiles that drive themselves, that are touted for saving parking spaces, being entirely safe so that accidents will decline, electronic bathrooms. We're all used to going into bathrooms and having things flush, not touching anything, we don't get diseases. We wash our hands without touching things, we dry our hands without touching things. In some modern systems in Japan, even if your bottom touches something, it will be washed with warm water afterwards. And internet dating, which I'm sure all of us have done. The field research for that aspect of this talk was a lot of fun. So since the foundation of the automobile age, a number of people said that the automobile was inherently democratic. My favorite example of this is the work of Frank Lloyd Wright, one of my favorite architects of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. He, in fact, developed a utopian broadacre village, and he contended that people could live distant from each other in beautiful houses, but use automobiles to gather in town meetings so that the automobile would serve as a tool of democracy. And similarly, people look at the internet and the computer, and they also talk about the way in which the modern internet is inherently a tool of democracy. The rapid transmission of information, the creation of desktop publishing so that anyone can produce information no longer controlled by the state, for example, instantaneous access to the truth that our students often insist exists if they just look it up and look at one website and then they know knowledge. The color revolutionary movements that took place around the world, all of these things, the promoters of technology say are tools of democracy and equality. Here's my favorite, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, because of my close involvement with Russia and Ukraine over the years. And may Putin and the Russians fail in their efforts to destroy a sovereign nation, Ukraine. But all of the positive ideas about modern technology are shaped by powerful interests, businesses, innovators, populist politicians and others, entrepreneurs, bankers, engineers, managers. They're not going to say, look, I have a new technology, this will make life more dangerous for us, watch out. They will say, invest in this, it's a great opportunity, but they're trying to make money, or they're trying to control people. And those who build and operate the technologies throughout history have paid with their livelihoods, with their health, with their environment, workers in factories, peasants pushed aside for new gleaming hydropower stations. There are always great health and environmental costs associated with innovation. I can talk about nuclear power if you want to hear my riff on how nuclear power is hardly green, although it is touted today throughout the world as a solution to global warming. So the first case is autonomous automobiles, these self-driving things. And as Wetmore notes, the promoters have controlled the narrative about how wonderful these things are. Safe, inexpensive, solving the problems of parking, fewer parking spaces, so that we can reclaim parking garages and city streets for human purposes. Will the autonomous vehicle, AV I write here, solve and end traffic? Will it solve problems of parking? Will it lead to safer transport? Will it end pollution? Perhaps only the latter, if you look at these things rather carefully. Its many failings are already clear in the way in which, for example, it may be cheaper for people to program their automobiles to drive around rather than find a parking space when they go to work. So it doesn't really end parking. And furthermore, people will keep their automobiles, their older automobiles. Not everyone will buy them tomorrow when they're available. We still have the old machines to deal with. And as I'll talk more in a few moments, there are racist aspects of the AV that are not recognized by most people. Along the way, if you look at the predictions of Google, Tesla, and other companies that have been producing and advancing autonomous automobiles, every year they have a prediction of when these things will become available, take over our streets, and make the world safer and cleaner. Now they're saying by the end of the 20s, the AV will become standard. My prediction is by the end of the 20s, they will say the end of the 30s. I think I'll be correct there. The autopilot technology has not prevented accidents. There is a website, tesladeaths.com, for example. But even more than this, automobiles are programmed to save the driver. This is what Tesla, Mercedes, and others do. Instead of worrying about troublesome details like ethics, Mercedes will program its cars to save the driver and the car's occupants in every situation, which may mean hitting pedestrians. There are much cheaper and better ways than AVs to solve the problems of automobiles. Lower speed limits, 30 kilometers per hour in the city generally. That's the speed at which, if you're hit by a car as a pedestrian, you're more likely to survive. Anything above 30 kilometers per hour, you're much more likely to die. Of course, it depends on where you're hit and so on. Dedicated bike lanes, narrower streets, wider sidewalks, all of these things ultimately are cheaper than building the infrastructure for electronic autonomous vehicles. And then there's the problem with the touch screen. I don't have a touch screen in my very old car. It's 11 years old. My previous car was 21 years old when it died. And it turns out that if you use a touch screen, you're going to get confused. A Swedish magazine, Bilegare, did a study with 10 different automobiles with touch screens and gave the driver 10 different tasks to perform. And it took, as you can see here, with the worst performing one, I have to quote, I'm distracted. It takes 1,400 meters to perform a simple task. They're not necessarily safer. There's some other problems with autonomous vehicles. They're very expensive. Billions of dollars and euros in capital and annual costs will have to be spent for them to operate. This means that fewer funds will be available for other things such as public transportation. And AVs do not contribute to mobility justice because those who use them will likely be the wealthier members of society who can afford them. This will leave poorer people out, as usual. And finally, with AVs, there's also discrimination, racial discrimination in AVs. They do not detect. The softwares that have been developed by the engineers have a more difficult time sensing people of color, pedestrians, than they do white folk. And this has been a problem in computer facial recognition technology for years. The same kinds of problems exist about a gulf between the haves and the have-nots in terms of electronic commodes and bathrooms. 2 billion people, we take for granted when we go to airports or restaurants or what have you, that everything's clean and safe and perfect and modern. But there are still 2 billion people in the world who do not have proper sanitation facilities, and there's open defecation throughout the world. So we have a have and a have-not situation, north-south, that is largely, again, racially biased. There are simple solutions to cleanliness and better bathrooms than having electronic devices everywhere. The reason why I wrote this chapter in a forthcoming book is because of the fly stenciled in the urinals of Schiphol Airport. They were having trouble with men. Men have bad aim or don't care or something like this, and they were peeing on the floors. So in Schiphol in the 1990s, they began to stencil a little fly inside the urinals. Men tried to aim for it. and it cut cleanup costs by about 50%. When you think about the 68 million passengers, let's assume half of them men, this is much better than automatic flush systems, which in fact have this problem with auto-flushing. They don't just flush when we enter and leave. And in fact, the first time I used flush this time, I was in Uppsala about to give a talk, and I went into a bathroom, one of the first, this must have been 1992, there were 12 urinals along the wall. Every time someone opened the door, they would all flush. That's wasteful. They seem to be a good idea because we have such fear of last century of STDs and this century of COVID. But once again, we're leaving a third of people in the world out of modern facilities, and that's where we ought to invest. The UN Sustainable Goals, Objective 6, is by 2030 to overcome this problem of bathroom inequality. And then there's also the problem of transients and travelers. And in the US, there are challenges because Republican legislators want to prevent people they don't like from using public bathrooms. I think that's the best way to put it. So once again, there may be an electronic device, but it's not free of our prejudices and our financial problems. And then finally, internet dating. This was fun to write about and to think about. Is the internet the solution to loneliness or the pursuit of a one-night stand? And what generally is the impact of technologies on human courting and practices and sexual behavior? The automobile, once again, extended the horizon. The telephone, here's the automobile. people being able to move much more freely away from the prying eyes of their parents. The use of the telephone as a gendered object, the call girl. I think that's a Bangladeshi website. I just picked one off the web. I did not call her. And when you call it, it could be a man, but with a very seductive voice if you're a hetero male looking for a hetero female. I don't know. I don't see them at the other end. Everything's gendered. Everything reflects our current values and beliefs. Action figures with roles so that children are taught what male and female are from an early age. Here are my favorite dating sites, or some of them. Christian Mingle, if you're looking for some sea captain. Any of you like the sea? If you have a tiny penis, there's Dinky One. Christian nationalists, those who want to bring world revolution in Nazi fashion, called together. Gluten-free singles. I only date women who, I'm hetero, I'm sorry, but I am, who like gluten. And who like pirates and are in prison, meet an inmate. This is Tinder 1913. I just wanted to point out that there's also a history of selfies. You know, there's too much selfie, but this is a selfie, Picasso selfies. Internet dating is not a panacea. That's the problem. It's the same old difficulties that we have. Loneliness, reticence to speak, false promises, profiles being ways of phishing. Consider Tinder alone, that people on Tinder are swiping 10 times a day. They're trying to identify positive mates 10 times a day. That's not dating, that's not courting, that's just a numbers game. Heavens. There are also dangers in the internet. There's a website, Ashley Madison. I don't know if many of you know this one or have used it. It's for people who want to have affairs. But Ashley Madison began to send bills to people who had subscribed to the service, to their homes, to embarrass them, to get them to pay even when they didn't have charges. And then hackers sexting, these are just problems that are associated with internet dating, that we're not free of things like harassment, pornography, mistreatment of others, lack of respect. The electronic dating world does not solve these problems. That courting, using sexting, sending images of yourself that may be, how should we say, dirty, prurient, is in a way a Darwinian thing. Because according to Darwin, those male species with the larger plumes tend to have the more copulations. But this ignores a whole social structure connected with dating. This is one of my favorite memes concerning sexting. Okay, there are risks. There are risks. You may lose your job. There's no way to call back texts. Even more, a vast number of women who are in the dating world using electronic dating services have been harassed, and the harassers are verbally violent. Most places have only recently passed legislation to enable the punishment of people who are harassing electronically in ways that we would not tolerate face-to-face. And the internet is basically white and wealthy. It's it's a misassumption to say that the computer changes the way we behave. So technology, these 3 case studies, and I realize I rushed through them with so many slides, cannot change our social mores, beliefs, and attitudes suddenly. We can embrace technologies, but they're not a panacea for human behavior, who we are. We must always recall technologies for what they are, not a solution, but an artifact, or a device or a system produced within garages, laboratories, and businesses, among defense contractors and entrepreneurs trying to make money on us. And there are much more simple solutions to the problems we face, like crowding in cities and unsafe automobiles and challenges in meeting our potential mates. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much.